I'm Melissa, and this isn't just some story about Christmas dinners or sisterly drama. It's about the weight of being the wrong daughter, the invisible one. And it's also about my daughter, Grace, whom I refuse to let carry the pain I grew up with. Grace is 10. She's got a mind sharper than most adults I know and a heart big enough to carry the world. She asks questions, real ones, the kind that stop you in your tracks. Mom, why does Grandma act nicer to Aunt Stephanie than to you?
What do you say to that?
Is that it's just how things have always been? That some families are built on favorites and fractures? Growing up, I was always the problem. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I didn't fit. My earliest memories are of being told I needed to watch what I ate, long before I even understood what calories were. I remember being 8 and standing in front of the mirror while my mother pointed out the baby fat on my arms. Stephanie, on the other hand, could do no wrong. She had those perfect curls, that fake laugh adults seem to love, and a gift for soaking up attention like a sponge. Stephanie was the golden child. She got the biggest slice of cake, the best birthday presents, the shiny red bike I'd begged for. I got the leftovers, if that. My parents adore her. When she teased me about my weight or called me names in front of her friends, my mother would smile like it was some adorable joke. "It's just sister stuff," she'd say. My dad would glance up from his newspaper, mumble something about toughening up, then go right back to ignoring me. I learned early that I was allowed to exist, but not to shine. One time, I won an award in middle school, a writing competition. It was a big deal. I had worked for weeks on that essay. My teacher even called home to say how proud she was of me. When I got home, my mom told me Stephanie had just made the cheerleading squad. We went out for ice cream to celebrate. My award? It sat in my backpack for a week until I finally tacked it up in my room myself. Even my graduation day wasn't mine. I stood there in my cap and gown, feeling this strange flicker of hope, like maybe this time they'd see me. But Stephanie showed up in some tight little dress and immediately became the center of every photo. No one even asked me what my plans were. I just smiled, posed, and went home wondering why I ever thought that day would be different. This isn't a holiday story. Not really. It's about a family that taught me how to disappear, and the daughter who's teaching me how to be seen. College was supposed to be a fresh start, but I arrived with old wounds still bleeding beneath the surface. I wore baggy sweaters even in summer, kept my opinions soft and my presence smaller. I didn't believe I deserved to take up space. Then I met Michael. It wasn't fireworks at first sight. It was something slower, deeper. The first time he asked me out, I nearly said no. I'd convinced myself people like him didn't see people like me, not really. But he did. And not in a grand, sweeping way. He saw the little things. The way I flinched at compliments. How I always deferred to others. I apologized before speaking. On our first real date, he asked what I wanted to eat. I hesitated, hearing my mother's voice in my head. Maybe just a salad? I offered, already bracing for judgment. Michael raised an eyebrow, grinned, and said, "I'm getting a double bacon burger with fries. Want to split some onion rings?" And I laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in a long time. I ordered exactly what I wanted. I didn't regret it. He didn't fix me. That's not what love does. But he gave me a mirror that wasn't warped. Slowly, I started seeing myself not through my family's lens, but through my own. I wasn't too much or too little. I was just enough. Of course, the past doesn't vanish just because you fall in love. When we got engaged, the family tension wrapped itself tighter around me. At our wedding, Stephanie showed up in white. Not off-white. Not cream. Bright, bridal white. My mom told me not to make a scene. She said I should be flattered that Stephanie wanted to match. During the reception, she whispered that my dress could have used a better tailor. Michael saw the look in my eyes and didn't let it slide. He took my hand, kissed my temple, and later told my mother, calmly but firmly, that the day wasn't about anyone else. And I looked radiant. I didn't realize how deeply I needed that kind of backup until that moment. Not a knight in shining armor fantasy, but a partner who stood beside me, not in front of me. That Thanksgiving, a few months later, we went to my parents' house. It didn't take long before Stephanie was bragging about something, some new car, some vacation. Then she made a joke about how I'd finally gotten a man. Michael looked her dead in the eye and said, "Melissa is worth more than your approval. I'm grateful every day that she chose me." The room went quiet. My mom changed the subject. But I finally exhaled. After we got married, I made a promise to myself. I would build something new. Our home wouldn't echo with old voices. It would be a place where laughter didn't sting and love didn't come with conditions. Where Grace, when she arrived, would never wonder if she was enough. Because she'd know, just like I was finally starting to know. I made a quiet vow the day Grace was born. She would never grow up believing her worth depended on the space she took up, or the way she looked, or how much she pleased other people. I held her tiny body against mine and promised her a different kind of childhood, one where she'd be seen, heard, and celebrated for exactly who she was. And for a while, that's how it went. Grace was wild and radiant. She painted murals on cardboard boxes and gave her dolls full backstories and emotional arcs. She'd belt out songs in the grocery store aisles and ask strangers if they wanted to hear a poem she wrote. Confidence wasn't something we had to teach her. It was in her bones. But the world has a way of creeping in. It started slowly, around the time she turned 10. At a family barbecue, my mother watched Grace take a second hot dog and said, "Careful, sweetie. That's how it starts." Grace froze. She didn't even know what that meant, but I saw the seed being planted, the same one that had been buried in me years ago. I stepped in quickly. She's hungry, and she can have as many as she wants. I smiled, but my voice was steady. My mother shrugged, but the damage was already done. On the drive home, Grace was quiet. Later, she asked if I thought she looked different than the other girls in her class. A few weeks after that, we visited Stephanie. Her twins, Emma and Lily, were paraded in front of us like little trophies, matching outfits, choreographed manners, praise for how slim and tall they were getting. Stephanie looked at Grace and said, "Well, not every girl's built for ballet. Maybe something else more her speed." Grace laughed politely, but I saw the flicker behind her eyes. I used to stay silent. I used to swallow the small humiliations to keep the peace. But not anymore. That night, I told Grace that her body wasn't a problem to be fixed. That she didn't need to look like her cousins or act like them. I told her that strong comes in different shapes, and so does beautiful. I told her that Stephanie's voice wasn't the final word, and never had been. And then I did something harder. I told my mother we wouldn't be coming to every family gathering if the comments didn't stop. I said it without flinching. Her jaw tightened. She called me sensitive. But I stood firm. Grace matters more than keeping the family comfortable. Breaking the cycle means doing the uncomfortable things, saying the hard words, choosing her again and again, even when the people who raised me don't understand. I see parts of myself in Grace, the fearless parts one wasn't allowed to nurture. And I'll fight to keep those parts alive in her, no matter who I have to stand up to. I almost didn't go. I stared at the RSVP on my phone for days, hovering over no more times than I could count. But Grace was excited. She'd made place cards with everyone's names in glitter pen and tucked them into her backpack like treasure. "It'll be better this time, right, Mom?" she asked, eyes full of hope. "How do you say no to that?" So we packed up the pie I made from scratch and Grace's art portfolio, and we drove into the lion's den. The moment we stepped through the door, I felt it, that old, cold current. My mother greeted us with a tight hug that smelled like Chanel and judgment. "You brought a pie," she said, taking the dish without looking at it. "Oh, well, there's plenty of dessert already. We'll find a spot for it somewhere." She placed it near the sink, half covered by foil, like it was something she didn't want anyone to notice. Grace skipped ahead, wearing a blue jumpsuit she'd picked herself, a little sparkly, a little bold. She was so proud. But then Stephanie appeared, drink in hand, and gave Grace the kind of once-over I knew too well. "Wow," she said slowly. "That's a strong color. Emma and Lily are upstairs if you want to change." Grace blinked, caught off guard. "I like what I'm wearing," she said softly. Stephanie smiled. Of course. Confidence is key. In the kitchen, I offered to help. My mother handed me a towel. You can dry them, just be careful with the glasses. Every word sounded like an instruction wrapped in an insult. When it came time for the family photo, one of those traditions Stephanie insists on, we lined up in the living room. The photographer my dad hired started arranging people. Grace and I stood to the side, waiting. Let's keep it to the core family, Stephanie said, waving us back. We'll do a bigger group one later. It never happened. Grace didn't say anything, but I saw her take a slow step backward, folding her arms across her chest like armor. Later, she pulled out her sketchbook, hoping to share the portraits she'd been working on. She'd drawn every family member, carefully, lovingly, even Stephanie. But when she passed it around, the responses were polite at best. Oh, said my mom, very expressive. Stephanie snorted. I mean, the proportions are a little off, but you've got time to learn. Emma's in digital now, you should see her shading. Did you take lessons for this? My dad asked, not unkindly, just absent-mindedly. No, Grace replied. I just like it. No one said they were proud. No one asked about her inspiration. They flipped through the pages like they were checking a menu they didn't plan to order from. I smiled. I thanked them. I said nothing. My hands trembled just slightly as I sipped from a plastic cup of cider, eyes fixed on Grace across the room. Her shoulders were tighter than when we arrived. Her voice was quieter. And I knew that familiar feeling settling into her chest, the one where you start to wonder if maybe you're too much or not enough. My heart was screaming, but my mouth stayed shut. At least for now. The yard was still muddy from yesterday's rain. Grace had gone outside with Emma and Lily to play after dinner. Too much energy to sit through another hour of adult conversation. I'd watched her through the kitchen window, laughing in that easy way she always did when she felt safe. For a moment, I believed the worst was behind us, that we could make it to the end of the night without another cut. Then I heard it. Not a scream exactly. More like a gasp, followed by silence. I rushed outside. Stephanie was standing by the edge of the patio, arms crossed, lips twisted into a smirk. Grace was on the ground, soaked, muddy water dripping from her elbows and hair, her blue jumpsuit stained brown. Emma and Lily hovered nearby, wide-eyed and still. My daughter looked stunned, like the fall hadn't registered yet, but the words had. She was oinking, Stephanie said, not even trying to whisper. I was just joking. She kept bouncing and squealing like a pig. What? Now you're going to cry. Everything inside me snapped. Michael got there first. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He crouched beside Grace, took off his jacket, and wrapped it around her shoulders with the kind of tenderness that made my chest ache. Come on, baby, he said gently, brushing the hair from her face. Let's go through the side gate. We're done here. As they disappeared around the corner of the house, I stood frozen. Everyone had gone quiet. My father stepped onto the patio, confusion creasing his forehead. My mother followed, holding a dish towel, still pretending not to notice the storm in front of her. I looked at Stephanie. I looked at her. For once, she didn't look smug, just caught. You know what? I said. My voice was low, steady. I've let a lot of things go. I've swallowed every insult, every comparison, every sideways glance you've ever thrown at me. I smiled through your wedding stunt. I kept my mouth shut when you laughed at my daughter's art, when you talked about her body like she wasn't standing right there. Melissa, it was just my mom started. No, I said. Don't tell me it was a joke. Don't tell me to calm down. You watched it happen. You always watch. And then you pretend nothing happened. Stephanie rolled her eyes. It was an accident. She slipped. I stepped forward, chest burning. She slipped because you pushed her. And you called her a pig. You looked my daughter in the eye and tried to break something inside her. Just like you all did to me. But I won't let you. Not her. Not again. My mother's mouth opened and closed. My father stayed quiet, retreating into that silence he'd always used to protect himself. I don't want your apology, I continued. I want you to sit with this. To know you are cruel, and we're done pretending it's okay. I turned and walked through the same gate Michael and Grace had used. I didn't pack up our things. I didn't check to see who was watching. I didn't look back. Grace was already in the car, bundled in a blanket we kept in the trunk. Michael sat in the driver's seat, hands clenched on the wheel, waiting for me. I slid into the back next to her, pulled her close, and whispered, "You did nothing wrong. You hear me? Nothing." She nodded, but tears kept slipping down her cheeks. I let her cry. I let myself cry, too. Halfway home, Michael reached back and took my hand. No words, just warmth. We drove in silence most of the way. The kind that wasn't empty, but full. Heavy with everything that had been said and everything we didn't need to say anymore. For the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt free. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No phone buzzing. No "are you okay?" texts. Just the dull ache behind my eyes and the weight of what we'd left behind. But for once, that weight didn't feel like guilt. It felt like space clearing itself, space to breathe. I blocked the numbers. My mother. My father. Stephanie. I didn't write a long message. I didn't explain myself. I just did it. Not to punish them, but to protect us. Grace sat beside me at the kitchen table, sketching in a new notebook. When she asked if we'd be seeing them again, I told her the truth. Not for a while, I said. Maybe not ever. She didn't ask why. She just nodded and said, "Good." Later that day, I called Stephanie. Not to fight. I'd already done that. I called because I needed her to hear my voice. Not angry. Not crying, just steady. "You crossed a line," I told her. Not just with me. With Grace. And I've let too much slide in this family for the sake of peace. But peace shouldn't cost us our dignity. You don't have to like how we're living our lives, but you don't get to make us feel small for doing it. You don't get that access anymore. She hung up. That was fine. I didn't expect closure. I wasn't looking for it. A week later, I booked my first therapy appointment. It felt strange, sitting across from someone I didn't know, peeling back layers I'd spent a lifetime hiding. But the words came one by one. Shame. Anger. Grief. And underneath all of it, a kind of hope I hadn't felt in years. Like maybe healing didn't mean erasing the past, but understanding how not to carry it forward. Grace started therapy, too. Her sessions were shorter, lighter. She drew feelings instead of speaking them sometimes. But I could see the change already. She was sleeping better, smiling more. She started humming again when she brushed her teeth. That was when I knew she was coming back to herself. One night, over dinner, just the three of us, Grace looked up from her plate and said, "I don't think it was about the dress." Michael and I paused. "What do you mean?" I asked. She would have said something no matter what I wore. It wasn't the jumpsuit. It's just who they are. And I don't want to be like that. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Neither do I. We started our traditions after that. Sunday mornings became family adventure days. Sometimes we went hiking. Sometimes we drove to towns we'd never heard of just to try a new diner. Sometimes we stayed in and made forts out of blankets and watched old movies with popcorn and mixing bowls. Our home changed, too. Less careful, more alive. Grace taped her drawings to the walls. Michael danced while making breakfast. I laughed louder, cried softer. We didn't pretend everything was okay, but we didn't carry our pain like armor anymore either. Breaking the silence wasn't easy, but it made room for something real, something ours. And that's what we chose. Over and over again. It started with a letter, folded neatly in an envelope with no return address, just my name written in Stephanie's familiar, looping script. I held it for 3 days before opening it. Part of me expected more of the same, justification, deflection, maybe a half-hearted apology buried under blame. But it wasn't that. It was raw, unpolished. She admitted she'd been cruel, said she didn't know why she needed to cut me down to feel seen. She wrote about our childhood, how being the golden child was never as golden as it looked, how she'd felt pressure to perform, to be perfect. and how she'd made me the villain in her head because it was easier than facing her pain. She ended it with a sentence that sat in my chest for days. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know I see it now. I didn't cry. I just sat there in the quiet and let myself feel everything. The sorrow, the relief, the cautious stirrings of something like possibility. 2 weeks later, we met at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. I wore no makeup, no armor. She looked smaller somehow, like she'd been carrying something heavy for a long time and had just started putting it down. I don't know what to say to make it right, she said as we sat down. I don't think there's a perfect thing to say, I replied. But this is a start. We didn't fix everything in that 1 hour, but we talked. About our daughters. About the lies we'd been fed about what love and worth were supposed to look like. And about what we wanted to be different if there was a path forward. I told her there'd be boundaries. My priority was Grace, and I wouldn't risk her safety, emotional or otherwise. She nodded. That makes sense, she said. I wouldn't expect anything else. Not long after, I had the same conversation with my parents. It wasn't warm, but it was honest. I told them if they wanted a relationship with us, they had to meet us where we were, not where they wished we still lived. There were no fireworks, just quiet nods and the kind of silence that didn't try to win. Then something I hadn't expected happened. Grace asked to see Emma and Lily again. They're not their mom, she said. They didn't push me, and I think they didn't know how to say sorry either. So we planned something small. A family dinner at a restaurant, neutral ground. No one hosted. No one held power. Just a table, some shared plates, and a little bit of hope. Grace and her cousins laughed like nothing had ever gone wrong. Stephanie and I exchanged glances across the table. Brief, but genuine. My mom asked about Grace's art. My dad didn't say much, but he paid for the meal without comment. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything. But it was a beginning. And for the first time, beginning didn't feel like starting over. It felt like starting better. We took our first real family vacation that summer, just the 3 of us, plus a long list of boundaries packed between swimsuits and sunscreen. Grace picked the cabin. Michael handled the grilling. I brought too many books and didn't apologize for any of it. It wasn't flashy. There were no perfectly posed photos, no matching outfits. Just us, laughing over burnt marshmallows and playing card games until midnight. It felt like a new kind of tradition, one we'd built with intention, not inherited by default. Halfway through the trip, a letter arrived at our house. My neighbor texted me a photo of the envelope, and I recognized the handwriting instantly. My father's. I waited until we got home to open it. It was simple. No grand declarations. Just a few sentences scribbled in a shaky pen. I should have spoken up more. I see now how much you were carrying. I'm sorry for what I let happen in silence. I hope you're finding peace, Melissa. I read it once. Then again. And then I placed it in a drawer, not to hide it, but to keep it, proof that even silence can eventually break. Later that summer, we hosted a barbecue at a local park. Stephanie came. She brought Emma and Lily, and a cooler full of drinks. She didn't try to control the day. She didn't try to take up all the space. At one point, in front of Grace and a few other family members, she quietly said, I messed up. Badly. And I'm working on it. You deserved better. Grace looked her in the eye and nodded. That was enough. As the sun started to set, I found Grace sitting on the edge of a picnic bench, watching the sky shift colors. She said, I'm kind of glad. She pushed me. I sat beside her, unsure of where she was going with it. Because if she hadn't, she continued, I think we would have kept pretending everything was fine. And maybe I wouldn't have known how strong we are. I didn't try to fix her words. I just wrapped an arm around her and let them land in my chest like soft truth. That moment, the puddle, the silence that followed, and the storm that came after changed everything. It broke us open. And sometimes that's what healing looks like. Not neat, not graceful, just honest. We don't go to every family event now. We choose. We protect our peace. We gather on our terms. Grace knows what love feels like, Not the performative kind, but the real thing. The kind that listens. The kind that stays. If you're reading this, wondering if you're allowed to draw your line, I'll tell you what I wish someone had told me sooner. You are worthy. Your voice matters. And boundaries aren't walls. They're doors. Once you get to open and close on your terms,